Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Gay. Thanks. Welcome back to those of you who have been with us from session one. I see familiar names in the chat. And for the benefit of our speakers today, can you put your name and affiliation in the chat just so our speakers understand where you're coming from and what your interests might be? So I'm, in the meantime, going to commence with introducing our illustrious panel today. We have some great diverse voices that we want to feature. And so I know that you may have seen in the promo material their bios, but in case you didn't, I really want to share a lot of their bio information just because they're all such interesting people that I think you'll agree with me on. So we'll start with Miho Morinoue. She's the program director for Donkey Mill Art Center, and Miho is a Hawaii-based artist from Ho'olualoa, raised by visual artist Hiroki and Setsuko Morinoue. I think many of you who are in the arts community recognize those names. With a background in both art and dance, she spent a decade performing with the Complexions Contemporary Ballet in New York City and collaborating with renowned choreographers across the country. Her artwork, she's multi-talented here, her artwork is included in the collections of the Library of Congress, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and the State Foundation on Culture of the Arts here in Hawaii. As program director at the Donkey Mill Art Center on Hawaii Island, she continues to nurture community connection through arts and cultural education. So welcome, Miho. And then moving along, we have Cassie Ordonio. And Cassie is the culture and the arts reporter for Hawaii Public Radio. If you are HPR fans, you probably would recognize her voice. She covers various communities, including those in the diaspora. She previously worked at Honolulu Civil Beat, covering education, homelessness, and local government. So she comes with just a myriad of expertise and mana'o across many different issues. She's of Filipino and Chamorro descent, and she was born and raised in California. She also worked in San Francisco at newspapers El Decolote, 48 Hills, Ingleside Light, and Castro Courier. She graduated from the University of Hawaii at Manoa with a bachelor degree in journalism and Pacific Island studies, and she's won various awards, including the very illustrious Edward R. Murrow Award and PMJA Award for her stories on Filipino tattoos and Pacific Islander musicians. I love this part. When she's not working, she is powerlifting, trying to keep her house plants alive, which I commiserate. And she's always on a desperate hunt for good horchata. And I'll think about where I've had good horchata and make some recommendations at some point. Welcome, Cassie. Okay, and then we've got my friend Nolan Hong, my partner in crime. Nolan and I have done a few things together in community, and he's a personal friend, and he's the producer and video strategist of Pop Creative Media. Nolan and his wife Jamie are the team behind Pop Creative Media. It's a video production company that has been producing content for local nonprofits, businesses, and families since 2014. Nolan has honed his interview technique through 200 plus interviews for his podcast and hundreds more for the 300 plus videos they've produced for clients. With a 20 plus year career in media as an actor, many of you may have seen him on a few commercials here and there. He's also a director and a producer, marketing experience as a media buyer and consultant, and in ad sales for TV and print. Nolan has a unique 360-degree perspective that inspires his creativity. So welcome, Nolan. Okay, that's our panel. And what we're going to start with, just very quickly, is just take turns. I did your formal introduction, but I would love just to hear from each of you about what has shaped, whether it's your background or recent experiences that have shaped the work that you're currently doing, and particularly in the arts. Maybe we'll start with Cassie.
Oh, I don't know. Where should I start? Well, after coming to Hawaii Public Radio, I got into the culture and arts beat, which, you know, at Civil Beat, we didn't really cover culture and the arts in that perspective. But I really wanted to get into journalism just because I wanted kind of like an outlet for writing. I've always loved writing since I was a little kid, and it kind of reminds me of my early child days of sitting at the coffee table reading the newspaper with my grandpa when I was living back in the Bay Area. But I took basically the non-traditional route since I was raised by my grandparents on the Filipino side. You don't really see a lot of Filipinos getting into journalism. My grandparents actually wanted me to be a nurse, a doctor, or a lawyer. Same story, every immigrant family, they want what's best for their grandchildren and their children. But for someone who grew up in the United States, that's just something I didn't want to do. It wasn't something I was passionate about, even though the money's good there. Journalism, we don't make a lot of money, but we don't do this for the money. We do this because we're passionate. Um, I did work 3 jobs trying to get to Hawaii just because I wanted to go to UH Manoa, especially studying Pacific Islander studies. And at the time, UH was the only college in the United States that offered Pacific Island studies as a higher education degree. But I really wanted to do something with Pacific Islanders just because my mom's Chamorro. Um, but with the power of storytelling in the arts community, I wanted to kind of debunk the fact that some people have told me getting into this beat that this is the feel good beat. This is the beat that's fluffy kind of thing. And I was like, oh, I don't really feel good covering this because man, like artists are so passionate. And if you piss off the whole entire art community, they're gonna be coming for you, kind of thing. And not only that, covering artists, especially who are revitalizing the practice of culture, for example, like the creation of ahu'ula. That's like some stories that people don't really get to see a lot of that, or even like writing stories about artists in the diaspora, especially of Pacific Islander descent, to kind of see how they tie that back into their homeland too, is also something that's worth highlighting because you don't really get to see that. Some people look at art, if you were to look at a painting, for example, and they just see art, but there's more of a story behind that than what's being written on the display. And so that's kind of where my storytelling comes in, is to kind of give that platform because honestly, people don't care what I say. They care what you guys say as a community. So that's kind of like what helped shape my storytelling. Sorry. I know it was a little
No,
bit
that's
long-winded.
beautiful. No apologies. That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, Miho.
Aloha! Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Lisa, and mahalo for inviting me into this conversation. Let's see a little bit about me. Like you mentioned, I was raised by 2 artists, so I think art is just fundamentally part of my life. Um, my parents were very observant of who I was, I think, from a very young age, and saw me dancing in front of the TV, and so without me having to sort of ask or wonder what I wanted to do. They just observed and tossed me into, these creative fields just by observation. And I think I fought tooth and nail at first, but my first class, I just fell in love with dance, and it led me into a career until I was about 30. I also costume designed and also assisted with setting ballets during my dance career as well. And through that, dance is also a language of storytelling. And I think there's such a diversity in how we tell stories as humans. And I think art gets neglected a lot of the times because I think a lot of people view art as like the finished product of something, a painting, a sculpture, but the process of it has a lot to do with exploring yourself and communicating with others. And it's really kind of the power of the process of creativity that we're celebrating, I think. Um, when I moved back to Hawaii, I think about 20 years ago, I didn't know what I was going to do. I decided to quit dance because my knees hurt, my hips hurt. But my parents had started this nonprofit organization called the Hololo Foundation for Arts and Culture, currently known as the Donkey Mill Art Center. And I had no plans. I came home just completely open. And my mom was like, "You need a job. What are you going to do?" So she said, go assist Gerald Lucena, who was one of our teaching artists at the time, in the in-school programming. And again, I fought my mother. I was like, I don't like children. But But she was right. I didn't have any plans, so I said, why not, you know? So I go and 3 days into me assisting the classroom, I fell in love with teaching art. The kids, we were like rock stars coming to school. Kids, they didn't have any art in the school, so we, just brought art, connected them to their own learning, their classrooms, sort of more like arts integration. And it allowed them to be really play and use their creative skills and in a way that I think wasn't provided in the classroom at the time. And ever since then, I was addicted, and I eventually became the youth education director. And then now I'm currently the program director, and I sort of oversee all of our programming at the mill. And let's see, currently I feel like my role at the mill is connecting the past to present and collectively maybe envisioning what the future could look like for us in the arts and cultural world. I believe that the art and creativity, I think, are innate, a sort of natural part of being human. And I think ignoring creativity in our everyday lives and in education creates this giant gap, I think, in the understanding of our world. I think in the capacity to become better humans. And so I really emphasize creativity and storytelling. Yeah.
Thank you. Also beautiful. You and Cassie are also already demonstrating mo'olelo, right? Storytelling, helping us to understand concepts around art appreciation just through your personal stories. So thanks for demoing that as we speak. Okay, Nolan, you're up, dude.
So I have to apologize if it seemed like I was a little distracted. It's because I can't figure out how to get my mouse to connect. And so I've been trying to use the trackpad, which is like so foreign to me these days because I haven't used a trackpad in forever. But and then also with that bio, I must not have wrote that because and this is Teddy. He's gonna make a lot of noise. But I must not have wrote that because it sounds like way better than what I think of myself. So maybe my wife did, but
Maybe your wife did.
yeah. And then I was like so thrown off because I thought Maggie was just like really like impressed with it, and then found out, though, that's just her profile picture. But my background has been in uh, I originally wanted to be a performer in music and acting and television and all that, and somehow found my way through my journey to working with my wife and creating videos. And through that process, I learned the beauty of collecting and hearing people's stories. Because when I first initially did an interview, is basically because my wife was too busy working the camera and the audio, because usually in her career she did the interviews, but because we started our business together, just us two, I was like, well, I'm standing here doing nothing and she's juggling these other things, so I have to ask the questions. And initially I was a terrible interviewer, and it was because I was concentrating more on the questions that I'm asking and not listening to the answers. And it wasn't until she pointed that out that, are you even hearing what they're saying? Because what they're saying is so important that there's follow-up questions that would be so interesting to have them open up more. And from that day on, I found such a beauty in listening to people's stories and connecting and learning and understanding them. And that's what I feel like the arts are, is just a communication tool and a connection tool for us, no matter what form of art it is. And so that's why I'm so passionate about not only uplifting the arts, but bringing more awareness and understanding of the arts, because it's only going to just make us more understanding of each other. And my hope is to just make the world a better place where we can love each other and understand each other. And I feel like art is a key tool to that. So that's why I love collecting stories and sharing them, and especially in the arts community. And this is Teddy.
Bravo.
Teddy got a cool haircut, I noticed. Um, Thank you. And I had a follow-up question, but you really all three have answered that question. It was, what are the ideas and the values that sit behind how you tell stories in your respective positions? And you kind of nailed that already. And I know we wanted to give Cassie also kind of a special angle too, because she's a reporter. So she's collecting stories from you. Many of you, maybe it's even with Nolan too, like to this extent that you're seeking media exposure for your projects, for your classroom, etc. Nolan and Cassie represent members of the media that are actually amplifying that story for you. And so at some point, they're going to ladle into their answers to my questions that particular angle of kind of the what the interviewer is looking for those of you who are interested. So what kind of feedback do you get from your constituencies on your stories? So for Nolan, you know, you're on TV, and Nolan, at some point, can you put in the chat your link to you know, your two television shows that you air for pop media, creative media? And Cassie, of course, could put in the chat her links to her stories on public radio. And then, Miho, if you could put in the chat just your link to the Donkey Mill Art Center, just so people can understand the programming that you offer. So at your leisure, if you can do that for the rest of us. But in the meantime, yeah, what kind of feedback do you usually get from your varying constituencies around the types of products that you're providing, the education? Really, all of you are providing education. And who wants to go first? Don't be shy.
Well,
Maybe we'll go in an order. So maybe we'll start with Miho next. Oh, you're muted.
Hello, hello. Um, I was talking to our marketing coordinator and about this question, and our constituents respond by reading our stories. So the way we share stories, we do it in our newsletter, social media, and then we do it within our own programming. So in the classroom and in our exhibition programming. So we have a variety of ways in which we connect people to stories. But with our newsletter and our social media, more and more people read our stories as we get better. Past 5 years, I think we've really emphasized storytelling because we have our the mill is multidimensional. We have in-school programs, after-school programs, exhibition programs. We have events, donor relationships, sponsors, all of our volunteers. We have to tell all of those stories because we wouldn't be here without any of them. So stories. By telling good stories, we gain lifetime members, donors, lifetime partnerships. We can expand our work collaboratively, and volunteers. So it's part of our sustainable tool, I think.
Mhm. Love that. Yeah, I appreciate that you're representing the views of a nonprofit arts organization, right?
Yeah.
And so thank you for that perspective. That's valuable. How about you, Nolan?
okay, there. Trying to figure out how to unmute. Okay, so the common thing that, and I love hearing this, is that when we are successful in our mission in capturing and sharing people's stories, is that they respond with that we captured it perfectly. We were able to communicate their story in ways that they couldn't imagine that they could in words, but
Mm,
through the combination of the way the story is woven through what their words were, along with the visuals of what they see, and then even sometimes to a certain effect, like the music that creates the
mm,
mood, it creates that feeling,
mm,
and that's what you want that feeling is what I imagine is the connection, where you connect to something within the receiver who is watching or listening to it, and it either resonates with them as far as it hits a nerve where they go, I feel the same way, or I've experienced something like that, or I understand. Um, and so that's what I think has been the goal every time in
Mhm.
capturing and sharing the stories is having it come across where the designated audience is able to connect to it. And so
Mhm.
one of the things I always point out to the people that we work with is, especially in the nonprofit sector, is that they're constantly in the grant writing kind of mode of where we have to like write out statistics and give out our quick blurbs of here's who we are and what we do. But we always challenge them to say, well, who is it that you're trying to reach? And let's say it's the general community. And then the next question is like, well, what would matter to them? And so that's when we target the story that we're trying to gather that would
Mhm.
matter to them. And a lot of times it's like personal type of things, not the statistics or not exactly what they're doing. It's what's happening or
Yeah.
what is the issue that is being helped with or challenged. So
Mhm. Mhm. I love that, Nolan. Like, you speak about it as if it's because you do it so much, you speak about it as if it's a formula. And I think a lot of individual artists, as well as nonprofit staff and, organizations, really struggle with one, having the resources and the time and the presence and the technology to be able to capture their stories in those ways. Um, and yet, I think a lot of people don't realize the effect of the emotion that is evoked when you employ all of those things: photo, images, sound, live video kind of thing, right? Really brings the story alive. So yeah, thanks for sort of encapsulating how you think about that. Okay, Cassie.
My position's a little bit different, being a journalist, but also we're in a different administration now, different landscape, and it's already hard enough to really get the public to trust reporters nowadays. That's what I find kind of challenging, but I always remember, and I go back to one of my favorite scholars was Apeli Hau'ofa, and my mindset going into communities is, we shouldn't be defined by the smallness of our islands, but the greatness of our oceans. And I always take that with me with every community I go to, especially communities that I haven't really talked to or spoken to before, is to keep an open mind and know that like I'm not indigenous to Hawaii. I'm not from here. So I always have to be mindful of how I approach communities wherever I go, but it is a challenge because sometimes, it's just like art in general. Journalism is kind of similar to art, is where not everyone's going to be happy with your work, or some people are absolutely going to adore your work. Um, but it's a fine balance. But for covering stories, for example, like what happened with the past 2 years in the legislative session. I mean, this is like the first time I've actually seen the art community, and you folks can correct me if I'm wrong, but in my almost 7 years of living here, this is like the first time I've seen the art community come out in full force over this legislation that threatens funding to the arts. I've never seen so many artists in one place before other than these art events. So it was very humbling to see and to get to report on it. And it's also important to have that kind of storytelling because, and I think I put the link in here too. Um, the power of off the record sources, and I know talking to journalists is it's such a scary thing because whatever you say on the record, you cannot take it back. And it's even worse with, I don't want to say it's worse, but it is worse with audio reporting because it's recorded. So you can't kind of backtrack what you say in that sense. But when it is helpful when folks in the art community give me off the record information, like for example, arts on the chopping block, for example, there was a lot of off the record sources to kind of allude to a certain lawmaker who was threatening the State Foundation of Culture and the Arts about this bill. And those off the record sources mean a lot. And off the record, for those who don't know, I know we say we don't use jargon, but we do. Off the record means that I don't want my name in the story. I'm just giving this information to help point you to the right direction. And it's also the same thing for on background. If you tell a reporter, hey, I don't want my name in this because I'm afraid of backlash, but I can point you to someone and I'm giving this for your information for further research. And then, of course, on the record, you give us like full permission to use your name and whatnot. And it is a lot. It's a lot of trust to give reporters because, you know, sometimes we try our best to get it right. And if we don't get it right, then issue the correction and then I'll just go cry in the corner somewhere. um, but um it is hard. It's a balancing effect because and I was talking to Lisa about this too, is what happens when communities are kind of at odds with each other in a sense. You know, we always talk about like, you know, community members against powerful lawmakers, but we don't really talk about the communities versus communities. And this is kind of one where I kind of caught astray. I got tipped about a story about the Farrington murals, and I knew about Worldwide Walls before, and the work that they do and how it's volunteer based and it's a great opportunity for artists. But there were some, not all, but some community members who weren't too happy about the murals, kind of thing. And so I was kind of put in this position where I was like, okay, I know Jasper Wong, I know this person, two people who were kind of not for the murals. But it was kind of like that in that position where I have to do my job and tell both sides of the story, and how people interpret it. It really is up to the public, on reading the story and hearing the story. But sometimes I do get some people who don't read past the headlines. And then I've actually got emails like, why didn't you interview Jasper Wong? And I'm like, I did. He's in the story. Kind of thing. So, you know, there's some benefits and challenges. Sometimes you'll catch strays, but when it's constructive, it's more helpful. And I have to keep in mind that, you know, artists, they're passionate storytellers, and that's why I always say that you piss off the whole art community, they'll come for you. And I say that with my chest, and that's the best thing. That's how you know artists are so passionate. Um, but also as a reporter, you know, kind of have to do my job, but also to kind of like minimize harm, you know. But it's the story. I bring up the mural story because it's one of those nuances, but it's supposed to invite conversation and hopefully move forward in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you for that story. Yeah, I appreciate um, that constituents are not always going to agree with you or with each other, right? So that's a interesting, nuanced issue to navigate. So, for those of you, since you are doing storytelling in your daily life, what advice would you give to any artist or organization, art organization, around how to tell their own story about their creations? And creations could be their programs or their artwork, you know, etc. Their events, right? Their arts events. And I know for Cassie, you know, she's had to interview people, so she has, you know, expectations or you know, think rules that she has to follow around how she takes in the information too. So, we'll start with Nolan, I believe, and then we'll go back to Cassie and then Miho.
I would my the thing that I would want to stress is that now more than ever, I think the world really appreciates and desires authenticity, and so we spent so much of our lives like trying to pretend to be like this perfect presentation of something or what we expect others to expect of us, but I find that the more just open, raw, and authentic you are to who you are and yourself, then the more people will know, like, and trust you. And I think whatever message that you're trying to portray, the first step is to get people to know, like, and trust you. And so, um, with that, I also say don't be afraid to really open up about your story and who you are first. And I think if you can tie in you personally to whatever you're trying to push, whether it's your program or your art, that connection of who you are and then why you do this is going to make people one, believe in you, in that you are the right person to be, carrying out this mission. And then two, they're also going to really feel that connection again with you as a human being. And I think that's the key to success of all of this is really getting people to connect with you first, and then you can tell them what you need.
And I can vouch for you for Nolan that he's become very vulnerable as a social media influencer online in talking about just some of his own personal struggles. And would you say, Nolan, can you talk about in the storytelling, you've got a professional persona and a personal persona, but you're trying to integrate them, it feels like. And what's that, if I may ask that side question of you, what's that journey been like to, do you have completely different audiences or are you finding that they're becoming one and the same?
I think they're becoming one and the same. And at first, it's extremely terrifying because I grew up in performing arts, and you have like I looked up to celebrities and such, and so I saw them presented in a certain way. So I had to feel like I got to look like that. I got to be perfect, and any sign of weakness is shameful. But like I said, I think people in this current generation, we appreciate authenticity because people will go, "Hey, you're just like me. Okay, I can relate to you. I like you." And so at first it was scary, but I'm finding that I'm having much more quality connections with the people. Before I would post things and you get the typical, "Hey, cool," and like, but now I'm getting the deep conversations and
Engagement.
private messages. Yeah. And I think that uh, there's another part that I was going to mention about that, but the,
Well,
I
and
guess,
always feel free, you can jump in later if it occurs to you, your
yeah,
point.
yeah. So I guess to answer your question, I think my audiences are kind of one and the same now, and people
Mhm.
appreciate that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I applaud you and Jamie, your wife, just doing kind of on the vanguard, I think, of integrating all of your personas. That's been interesting to watch just from the sidelines. So mahalo.
Oh,
Okay,
I remember what I was going to say.
yeah, go
You're
ahead. Go
asking,
ahead.
there's two sides. There's the professional one, and then there's me.
Yeah.
So a great example of that is I also professionally MC weddings and events. And then so the way talk in the Jamie always calls me like, "Oh, that's MC Nolan," because I go, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this event. Thank you so much for joining us." And it's like very professional and put together and stuff. But I used to be so terrified that if I make any mistake, throws everything off, and the gig is up. People are like, he screwed up. But now I actually make it part of it where this past weekend I emceed a wedding and I forgot the name of the groom, and it's written on the paper in front of me, but I failed to look at it before. So I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, please welcome the new Mr. and Mrs." And I had to look down, and it's so embarrassing. And normally I'd just be like, I gotta go run into a corner and hide. But it actually opened up into an opportunity where I was like, okay, let me explain what happened. Like later, like a few after, I was like, let me explain what happened there. And I explained the story about how I was trying to remember the name of the bartender because I wanted to acknowledge him. And then after I said his name, all I could hear was Zach, Zach, Zach. So I was about to say Mr. and Mrs. Zach. And I was like, oh, his name's not Zach. Wait, what is his name? And so and everyone just felt like more comfortable, like, he's, this is
People like
something that,
us.
yeah. So that's my example of how, blending the two personas for me actually has been kind of working well. And there's a time and place for both, but I always like to say that I'm one and the same, just a matter of
Yeah.
like what the setting is that requires which one.
Right, right, right. Mahalo. Thanks for being so honest. Cassie? Oh, wait. Yes, Cassie.
We're still talking about the advice we would give, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I would say, the work that you do is important, and if you know something is a really good story, always fight for it. Don't tell no one else that it's not a good story. And if there's still not they still won't say it's a good story, I think it's time to move on because someone else is going to value your work, um, and never have anyone try to devalue that.
Have you experienced that where you had to fight really hard to pursue a story? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't name the organization, but I will say it's not at HPR, it was not at Civil Beat. But I will say that I don't know if you folks remember the I Remember SciCap shooting that happened of a 16-year-old Micronesian boy from HPD. And if we all know the history here in Hawaii is that there's a lot of discrimination and biases against the Micronesian communities. Um, but there was a lot of hate, but there was also a lot of community support. And I had some sources who personally knew him
Mm,
and how, he didn't have this background that a lot of the media were portraying him to be.
mm,
And I pitched it to my editor at the time. And this was when I was still an intern. I didn't know any better. I was still going to UH. And when I pitched it to my editor, she said, "Well, why do we care about this? Why would readers care about this? It wasn't like he was a poster child." And that was verbatim. And at that time, I'm still an intern. I didn't know how to respond. I think I was just kind of dumbfounded that my editor actually said that to me because, that was kind of a gut punch for also someone who's also Micronesian to say that, okay, so who do we get to paint as the poster child then? Or like, why is he not important to cover? And at that time, I was also scared of like, okay, if I say something, do I lose my internship or whatnot? But now that I'm older, a little bit more experienced, I should have fought a little bit harder for it. But I'm actually glad she's actually my mentor, Anita Hofschneider, who's now at Grist.
okay. Yeah.
She got to do the story instead for Civil Beat. We just have the same idea because she's like an older sister to me and still my mentor. But even though the story didn't get told by me, I'm just happy it got told by her instead.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great example. Okay, Miho.
Hey, aloha. So many great points already. I definitely resonate with both Nolan, the authentic part, and that every story matters. I think that I believe that as well. And I wanted to sort of open up with this story. We had a visiting artist. Her name is Melanie Yahtzee. She's a Dene artist, and she is currently the head of the printmaking department at the University of Colorado Boulder. And she taught a workshop with us a couple years ago, and I happened to be observing her class. It was a printmaking class, and at the very beginning, she had mentioned, at the end of the workshop, each of you are going to stand next to your art piece and you're going to talk about your work and share what it means to you. And this is mandatory. And it's the most important part of the workshop and practice, she says. And because it is, she mentions it's valuable because if you let someone else tell your story, they'll probably get it wrong. And so you need to learn how to tell your story. And so that practice, that ongoing practice is something that she's invited into the classroom. And I think a lot of people had a hard time with it. But at the end, it was so valuable because the emotional experience that sort of started to sort of scaffold within the room allowed people to express more and how empowering it was, I think, in the classroom. And so I've taken that to heart and I've integrated into our classes, both off campus and on campus and in our exhibition and continuously with a lot of the work that we do with our youth. But I wanted to continue to add, I think, authenticity, very valuable. Know your audience. Who are you
Mhm.
speaking to? If you can, if you know your audience, use that sort of clear, accessible language. I think that in the arts can be intimidating, I think, by nature. A lot of people, I mean, at the mill anyway, we experience a lot of people not knowing how to look at art, being intimidated about going to the gallery, being intimidated by just taking a class. Because of the same things that Nolan was talking about. People have an idea of what art is or what an artist should look like or feel like or be. And we're so far away from understanding that this authentic self takes this practice and that we need to allow ourselves to be in this space. Um, and keep it simple. I think
Mhm.
you, as you practice, sharing your stories, sometimes it can get muddled with all these ideas. So, like, what's the point that you really want to make, and what's the purpose? Why? Um, and then if you are advocating for something, I think a call to action. So your story and how you can become involved or participate or enroll. So having those like clear steps. Yeah.
Mhm. That was also beautiful. So well said, and such a lovely segue for my last question for the hour of around a great segue of how do we tell these stories in the context of the advocacy work that we're doing, whether it's in our communities, within our organizations, within our communities, whether it's at the legislature, whether it's at the federal level with Congress. What advice would you have for you each had wonderful answers to the previous question. Does any of that change for the work that you would be doing in advocacy? And or are you adding a few more tips to that advice? And we'll start back with, I think it's Cassie.
Mm. I think I said this before, especially when it comes to advocacy work, and I still point back to the article about, the threats to the art funding. You folks as the community, you folks are the watchdogs, and a lot of us reporters, there's only so much we can do by getting the information, but really the news is actually coming from you guys. The advocacy work comes from you guys, and people don't care what I say, they care what you say. I'm just here to provide the platform and pass the mic to you guys and get your stories out there. And and I know it's very scary talking to reporters. I know like there's some people who actually do work for lawmakers that could put their job at risk because, I've met a lot of artists so far who they're working artists, they're struggling artists, and they're working multiple jobs just to stay afloat. And I know it's scary, but I think that's the power of like the off the record sources. If you're afraid of facing backlash, my advice is like you always tell a reporter, even if you don't talk to me, if you talk to any reporter and you're not comfortable, but you really want to get something out there, always say off the record right away, just so we have to honor that. That's kind of like our Bible to us. Or say, this is on background, please don't use my name. I'm giving this to you because I want you to get the story right. Um, that's kind of something. And then, or if anything, community building. Um, I mean, I'm totally for taking you out to coffee, my treat, or to lunch. And I'll just have HPR reimburse me and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's the best advice I can give is talk to your reporters and know like to say on the record, off the record, and that would save you a lot of heartache down the road if you don't talk to me or if you talk to another reporter.
Can I ask Cassie a follow-up question to that? I just watched a news segment about something that happened where somebody was giving a reporter a whole bunch of stuff, and then after the fact goes, "Oh, by the way, this is all off the record." And the reporter said that's not how it works. Is there something to explain that if you don't say it if you don't say off the record prior to what you say, that anything said before that is on the
Honestly, this happened to me like one time when I was an intern. But because if you were to give the reporter like an hour worth of interview, right? But if they say off the record, honestly, like in that moment, I kind of just like, okay, then I won't use it. I just move on to the next. But how to avoid that, because it hasn't happened to me since. What we normally do as reporters, we say, and I like to tell my sources, hey, this is the angle of my story. I'm writing a story about the revitalization of Ahu'ula and would love to have you in this story. And I want you in this story because you come from a cultural perspective. Are you comfortable? And then that's when I explain to them, like, hey, whatever you say is going to be like on the record. And then if there's something off the record, just let me know. And normally, like, this is kind of general practice for us now, and I've learned to do this over time is to let them know let my sources know ahead of time, like, hey, this is going to be off the record. And then I'll explain to them off the record. And sometimes, and this happened actually in my article, where someone was talking about Representative Kyle Yamashita, and this person said, hey, like, I'm giving you this off the record, don't use what I said. And that's when I have to honor it. But then they'll say, I want to go back on the record, and that's
Mm.
the information that we use. But that's the power of audio storytelling, because once they say off the record, I'll like mark it on my audio recording device so I can write in my notes like, okay, this is off limits. I'll just kind of use it to ask further questions to go if I want to go back to Kyle Yamashita, for example. But I wouldn't mention their name. I would just be like, hey, I'm hearing this. Is this true? Kind of thing. But unfortunately, good journalism practice, you would normally honor it, but because they didn't say off the record beforehand, technically that reporter actually has the okay to use it. I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit complex, but best practice is to for the journalist to say what the story is for, so there's no confusion, because not a lot of people know.
Mhm. Mhm. That was a great reminder for people. Sometimes you're just sort of chatting along, right, with the reporter, not realizing, oh, this is all going to get swept up. And so, good reminders to all of us. And then, what I kind of also gleaned from what you said, Cassie, is that you appreciate if someone actually provides you some context. So not necessarily the quotable quote, not necessarily the statement about I support this bill or I don't support this bill, but maybe the background machinations of what's going on that actually led to the way a committee behaved or voted or whatever. And so that's a reminder too, for all of you who are in this community as educators, as artists, you have you're experts in your fields, and so you can serve in those ways to actually round out a story for a reporter, so that the truth is really being the full context and the truth is being told. So we all share that responsibility, I think, in community to play that role. So thanks for that reminder, Cassie. Okay, Miho.
Thing to add, I think what Nolan was saying earlier about, a lot of the nonprofit work we do collect a lot of data-driven content because we have to do it for grant reports and so on. But it does help for advocacy as well, but in combination with obviously the stories, right? So who are we serving, how many, what the purpose is, and then sort of some of those sort of results of these programming and sort of example stories is sort of always the blend that I think is really valuable. So I think if you're an arts or educational center, arts and cultural educational center, any kind of nonprofit, I think to collect data is really important for advocacy work to actually prove with numbers and we might say there's the black and white information, but I think that for us, when we now that we have some of the amazing our small team, the capacity to actually collect and move through data, it really is eye-opening, and a way to confidently tell our story. So data is definitely important for advocacy, and human story is that other half. So the balance between the two, I definitely recommend. Yeah.
Lovely. How has it felt for you as a artist, a dancer, and a like a painter? Is it painter, artist? Uh,
Yeah.
how has it felt for you to move from that world to grant writing and data crunching?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I've learned to appreciate spreadsheets and data because its own way it tells its own story.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
I might know a lot of the human stories because I engage with a lot of people. But then when somebody tells me, oh, over the years, this is how our membership has grown and our, student body has grown, and this is how many students you engaged in
Yes.
26. Like, it's like you don't think about those numbers until somebody tells you, and it's like, wow. Then
Mhm.
you get to say that, and we did all these things. And so,
Right.
yeah, I think all the information is important.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Nolan.
So I would say that for as it pertains to advocacy, like establishing what the problem is
Hmm.
out the gate, but not only establishing what the problem is, but why should they care? Because you can say
Mhm.
like, I think we all come from this place of like, well, you should care because you should be a good person, like that's usually like the basic thing. But we got to understand there's people who don't understand that that the problem you're stating is a problem that matters. So,
Mhm.
really communicating and establishing that first. Once you get them to understand and agree with you with that, then you add all these things like, well, well, now that you know there's a problem, here's what we plan to do about it, and this is what we're pitching. And then when you're doing that, that's when you can add all of like the data and stuff, because then it shows that you actually thought about it and you have things to support your theory or idea and mission. So I think that's the key to me is that order. Because once you get them to understand, um, and at least that the problem makes sense to them where they care, then you're halfway there already.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. Are there any questions from the group for our panelists? Everybody's been a little quiet today. Or any advice to share yourselves, being embedded in community, doing the work that you're doing around this topic of storytelling. Okay, well, without any questions, I think, are there final thoughts from the panel about any of this? Anything that you felt you didn't get to cover? Pearls of wisdom, thoughts?
Can I say hi to Noi Tanigawa? Because I have not met her yet, but I think, yeah, if this is the same Noi Tanigawa at HPR, hi. I haven't met you yet, but nice to meet you.
Feel the same way, Cassie. Thanks. Thanks for your work.
Noe's the OG, right?
Oh, she's a legend over here.
Noe, I'm not to put you on the spot, but do you have any pearls of wisdom for the years of contribution to the arts?
Well, art's never been more important.
That's so true.
The rest of society is swung around to where
Mhm.
this touchstone to feeling human is essential.
Beautiful. Touchstone to feeling human is essential. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you all.
So we'll conclude. We have a big mahalo to the panel. You just provided such rich thoughts, experiences, stories. You demonstrated mo'olelo, as I said before. You spoke with your values, and I think that's, with you in our community leading the charge, we're in good stead. And so, mahalo to each of you for sharing your thoughts with us today. I will give this back to Gay, who's a dancer, by the way. Herself, had
Right.
done her fair share of dancing with a company in New York, and is, as you can see, a fierce advocate of the arts, performing arts as well. So take it away, Gay.
Lisa, thank you. A big thank you to you and to our guest as well. And Lisa, since we have just a couple minutes, would you like to give a quick preview of what will happen next week in our fourth and final session?
Sure. Cynthia from Creative West.
Cynthia Chin.
Thank you, from Creative West, who's a colleague of Gay's, is coming in at the top of the hour to actually give us an update on the federal issues, federal cuts, and how it'll affect the arts. And I believe is hanging around to answer any questions. And then we're actually doing session 4, our last session, as clinic style. We sensed over the last couple sessions that some of the topics were a little complex. Particularly Andy from the public access room what gave us a wealth of information, and it was a lot. And we could tell people were maybe needing some questions answered. So session 4 is really for you to come with a problem that you're noodling on, a testimony that you'd love to practice writing, questions about the legislative process. You know, I covered strategic plans around advocacy in the first session, and some of you might have questions about that as well, or any other questions that are related to advocacy that even maybe were not covered in the 3 sessions that we could create a list for, and if we can't answer it, we can certainly get back to you. So that's what session 4 is about. It's a little bit more interactive. We're talking less to you and asking of you to kind of help shape the content. So come ready with your questions. We hope to see all of our regulars back again. So
Yes. Thank you so much, Lisa. We're looking forward to that. And again, everyone, we will post each session on our website so that you can refer to them later if you'd like to. So again, thanks everyone. A big mahalo to everyone for attending and to our wonderful speakers today. Take good
thank
care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, did we lose? Oh, yeah.
Yes, I'm still here. Okay, just waiting on a couple more folks to exit. And I'll go ahead and stop the recording. Let me do that. Let's see here. Well, that's interesting. Let's see. Does anyone recall how to stop the recording? Oh, there we go. I see it. I see it. I've got it.
Up there.
Right. It's actually a new little button here below, so we're good to go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.